Hi and welcome! You will learn in this tutorial how to create a scrollable content box with entries that are flexible in size. Their width will be dictated by the width of the scrollable box, while each entry's height is automatically set based on the space required by its contents. This system consists of three parts working together: a scroll view that lets the player scroll through the entries, a vertical layout group which handles most of the stretching and size setting, and finally the entries themselves. Those can look however you want, of course, but I'll be using a simple horizontal layout for them with an image and some text. I will show you and explain what you'll need to do to achieve this functionality, but since we will be working with quite a few layout groups, you might want to watch my dedicated video on the layout system after you finish this one. It goes into a lot more detail and will give you a much better understanding of why and how the layout system works, so that hopefully you won't require as many tutorials like this in your future. Whenever you come across a complex layout like this, it's easiest to start with the smallest unit, which is the entry in this case. So create an image and call it entry. Create two child elements: an image and a text mesh pro container. Set up an image you want to use and tick the Preserve Aspect checkbox so you won't accidentally squash or stretch it. And fill your text box with some example text. Then style your background. I will use a 9-sliced image for this, which you can learn how to do here, and adjust any colors to match your ideal outcome. I'll keep my structure very simple here, so I won't divide the contents into headline and body text, and instead just use styles to handle that for me. This is not needed for this tutorial, of course, but if you are curious on how this works, you can find the tutorial for that over here. Next we need our first layout group. I'll opt for a horizontal one. Let's untick everything in the settings so we can start with a clean slate. To see any changes we are making, let's also add the content size filter here. We are on the top of the layout hierarchy, so we can do so without running into any issues. We will ignore things that come later and just focus on getting this one to expand and shrink based on its contents on its own. The first thing we want to do is to have this layout group control the actual width of its child elements. This will make sure none of the contents spill over to the sides. First, set the fitter's horizontal fit to preferred. Your box might already change its shape when you do this. Next, let's take Control Child Size and see what's happening inside the child objects. Boom! Your text box turned into a one-liner. Why is that? Let's check the TMP text box's rect transform. It is set to a ridiculously large number, but where did that come from? Click on the bar at the bottom and it will pop up with a preview. Yours will probably look different than mine, since I'm using an asset that makes it actually useful. But we're not here for this, we need the layout properties info box instead. And right here we can see the exact number our text box has been expanded to, written into the preferred width field. Change the amount of text of your box and see what happens to this number. It will grow or shrink based on your text length. But as cool as that is, we need this to wrap the text into a more pleasing length. Add a new component called Layout Element to the text box. We need to set its preferred width to something useful, and let's make life simple for us and copy that number to the minimum width as well. The text now wraps correctly, and we can see our box's width has been set to the number we set in the layout element. This new preferred size is reflected inside the layout properties of the text box as well. While you did this, you might have seen that our preferred height changed its value as well. Keep this in mind for now. The next issue we need to tackle is the layout itself. Somehow our image got shoved into some location far from the side, and our text box is way too small in width. Why is that? Let's click on our icon image. Notice how the width of this container is the width of the parent container minus the preferred width of the layout element of the text box? Cool fact, but how do we position the image further to the side and have the box be sized more reasonably to give the text box more space? Right-click on your image and create a new parent for it. Your whole layout will suddenly shrink and your icon will float in empty space. This is normal. Check the rect transform. This element is suddenly sized to 0. This happens because, as it is right now, this element is not containing any information about its preferred size. You can see that by the absence of the layout properties box down here. I actually only have a preview window and can't change it. If you switch to the icon image, you can also see that its width and height can again be accessed. I want the icons to always be 100 by 100 pixels in size, so I set those values by hand in here. That still did nothing for the width of the container. To get access to preferred values, we need any kind of a layout component, and using a layout element is ideal for this case. I'll give it min and preferred values that correspond to the value I set for the icon. Please check the in-depth tutorial on the layout group system to get a better understanding of what these numbers mean for your layouts. It's important to know, but would blow up the runtime of this tutorial. Since your icon might still float in space, set its anchors to the top left corner by Alt-Shift-clicking on the anchoring menu and picking the top left entry. This will make sure your icon is anchored to that corner of its container. Finally, your layout should roughly resemble what we are after. An icon to the side with text next to it. But of course, our text is still overflowing the box. In your entries layout group, tick Control Child Size Height, and you will see that absolutely nothing seems to have changed. But if you change the text box's rect transform, you can see that you can't change the height of the box by hand anymore. Change the height of your entry manually and check what that does to the text box's size. It will shrink to the height of the entry, but will only expand until it reaches a specific number. Remember when I said to keep some value in mind? Check the Layout Properties tab and see what your text box's preferred value is. Even if your entry allows for more space, ticking the check marks of Control Child Size Height will always make sure that the child element only expands in height up to their preferred size. Instead of setting the content size fitter to preferred width, now set it to preferred height. If you change the length of text, everything looks like it's working. But when you change the width of your container now, the text box doesn't expand as expected. Navigate back to the text box and remove the tick for preferred width this time. It served its purpose, so now our box expands and shrinks as expected. Well, until we are below a certain threshold, of course, as we kept the minimum width. Again, I go into why this is actually a good thing to happen in my layout system deep dive. In short, always make sure your elements don't shrink to values equal or smaller to 0, or you will run into issues down the line. Alright, almost done with the entry itself. All that's missing is some padding and spacing to make it look a whole lot less cramped. Next up is creating the container to hold multiple entries, and that's a whole lot easier now that our foundation is set. Create a prefab of your entry. Then right-click on it and create a new empty parent. I'll call mine Content with Flexible Entries. Just to see things in action, give it some rounded values for width and height. We want to create a list of entries in a vertical layout, and those entries need to expand in width in correspondence to the content container. Their height will be handled by all the work we previously set up. So, add a vertical layout container and untick Child Force Expand again. Duplicate your entry 2 or 3 times and change the amount of text in each. The boxes already shrink down in their height. Awesome! In your Contents vertical layout group, which one of these settings do you think, based on what we did up to here, will change the width of the child object so that its width is controlled by this layout group? No, get your mouse away from the boxes, give it a thought first. Control Child Size. That's the one that takes away our ability to set child object sizes by hand, so that this layout group can handle all of that for us. This will correctly expand the children to fit the layout. On the surface, this already looks great, but we will run into problems if we keep everything like this. Navigate to one of the child entries. See the warning on the content size filter? You will get this every time you add this component to a child object inside the layout hierarchy. This really is only to be used at the top of it, and if you keep this on child elements, there is a very, very high chance your layout will break once you fill it with content at runtime. I have seen people jump through tons of flaming hoops and adding components that refreshed the canvas when child elements changed because the developers thought they needed a workaround component here. We don't. We just have to trust the layout system. Go to your prefab and get rid of the content size filter altogether. Not just disabling it, remove it. When you change the contents of your text box now, it will overflow again, triggering some deeply held hatred for the UGUI layout system, I'm sure. Take a deep breath and navigate back to the content layout group. Tick Control Child Size Height. This now takes the drop of your previous content size filter and correctly expands the child elements to the space they require. You might see that some text is still overflowing. This is because the preferred height of your child elements is taller than your containing box. But since we will turn this into a scrolling box in just a moment, we do not care about this. Just add a new content size filter to the content container and set its height to preferred. It really is this simple. Please, I don't want to see any more 500 lines of code strong custom workarounds for this going forward. Were you one of those people writing those workarounds? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear if this was helpful to learn. And if you enjoyed this tutorial so far and learned something new, please give it a like and consider subscribing. And again, I have a deep dive into this whole layout system topic you'll enjoy. It even comes in PDF form. Okay, from here, things are getting simpler. Start by adding some spacing to the container's layout group. Then create a new scroll view as a new element on your UI canvas. I'll drop that scroll view into an image object anchoring it with Shift, Alt and the option in the bottom right to fill the available space. Then add a bit of an inside margin all around so that I can use a nice background image for the whole system. Inside the options, change the scroll sensitivity to 5 or 6. That's typically a good value for mouse scrolling. Uncheck horizontal since we only want to scroll vertically in this box. Click on the horizontal scroll bar in the settings and hit delete. Then navigate to the child object to remove that one as well. You could keep them, but I find designing to become a bit of a hassle with stuff being shown to me I don't need. I will also do some slight styling for my scroll bar. If you expand the child elements, you will find one called Content. That is typically where you would add your contents, but we already set up all of that. Drag your content with flexible entries to be a child element on the same level and delete the default content container. It might suddenly turn invisible. That's because of the mask and location of your container. Click on it and with Shift and Alt being pressed, click on the anchoring menu and pick the top right one, expanding it in width to fill the available space. As you can see, it will do its best, aligning its width to the viewport's width. Because we set its content size filter to use the preferred size, it will also expand quite a bit at the bottom, overflowing the initial scroll view. Thanks to the mask, that part is being hidden. Navigate to the scroll view settings and hook up your replacement to the content box, then enter play mode to test. I also removed the image of the scroll rect itself, so everything looks a bit nicer. If you are not a fan of the elastic effect when pulling too far over or under the first and last entries, change the settings to movement type clamp. The visual functionality being in, let's add some code to round this all off. We will create a very simple controller that creates new entries as needed and fills them with some content. I'll keep this one rather basic to show you the greater functionality. How it will look exactly in your project will always be very custom to your game's needs after all. We will also require a simple entry content script to manage what our entry displays. As before, we start at the end with the entry script. It's a simple mono behavior. It gets references to the icon image and the text box at the top. A setup method takes a sprite and a string to display them inside the image and the text container respectively. I will also use the iPointerClick handler to turn the whole entry into a button. In my case, I'm going to call the squash and stretch method of a script from a tutorial I created a while ago, so that I'll get some nice feedback when interacting with the element. Attach this script to the entry prefab and hook up the images and TMP box. If you notice that your entry doesn't react to clicks later in the game, check if your icon image or text box still blocks raycasts, and if they do, untick those checkboxes so that your mouse click actually reaches the background of the entry. Next comes the Content Manager. It gets a reference to the entry prefab, and we will create a list of entries to fill with icons and texts. The text area attribute will give us a much nicer text box to work with in the inspector. We create a method that will then rebuild the visual list in your game based on the contents of this class's list. There are multiple ways you can handle this. The first is having a set amount of entries already set up in your content box and only enabling or disabling the ones you actually need. This is great if you have a good idea of the maximum amount of entries your list will ever contain and don't need to change anything at runtime apart from making them visible or invisible. The second is that you can have an object pool of entries to work with and take or return those based on however many entries you need to display. This is a great solution when you know you'll have quite a massive amount of entries, or if you generally notice your game lagging whenever the list is being rebuilt. Look up Object Pool Unity if that is your route. It would majorly derail this tutorial. I, however, will go the absolute simplest route. I will instantiate a new entry and fill it with the required information, and when the list refreshes, I'll get rid of everything and rebuild it anew. Until I run into issues like lags or general usability problems, this is simple enough and quick to set up. If you have Odin Inspector installed, like I have, you can add the button attribute to your method, so you can call it from the inspector. If you don't have Odin, but would like the functionality, add the context attribute to it instead. Instead of a button, you'll get an entry in the right-click menu of your component, where you can find the method to call. I'll also make sure to call the method in start, so that we have a filled list right from the beginning. Save everything, then head back to the editor. Remove all entries from the content list and attach the manager to the scroll view. Then hook up the required references. Add some entries to your list with different lengths for text and images to display. Once done, hit play and give it a test. The initial list is being created and displayed, and when I click on an entry, the squash and stretch script plays its tweening animation. I can remove elements from the list and rebuild it, but of course also add new elements to the list or reorder it and then create it anew. The individual entries will keep on resizing based on their context, of course. For example, I can add and remove text from an entry, and the system we build will make sure we have enough space for it and resize elements accordingly. If you enjoyed this, I have a lot more tutorials all around the UI system on my channel. And if you enjoy written content, you can find my PDF guides on specific UGUI elements and the layout system on my itch page. Have a great week!